what is that smell? I am definitely getting a hint of a deal. Oh wait, it's more than a hint. Yeah, these are the best deals, and not just this season, but all year long. In all seriousness, the smartest shoppers know that you get the brands you love with the most savings and cash back with Rakuten. And I know I'm certainly interested in sniffing out those deals. Start getting cash back at your favorite stores like Urban Outfitters, Petco, even Expedia, and getting cash back doesn't mean you have to miss out on sales because those can be stacked right on top. It's easy to use and based on a simple idea. Stores pay Rakuten for sending them shoppers, and Rakuten shares the money with you as cashback through PayPal or check. Smells like a perfect deal to me. Download the free Rakuten app and never miss a deal. Or go to Rakuten.com to start getting the most bang for your buck. That's Rakuten.
Over the past several days, 3 females have been found dead.
Looks like someone's going after these girls.
Then they have to know to watch their backs.
Streaming now.
You wouldn't want what happened if this woman happened to you?
Exactly why I need to keep going on this.
Starring Emmy Award winner Amanda Seyfried.
I'm worried about what you're gonna find. So am I.
Long Bright River, a limited series. Streaming now. Only on Peacock.
Welcome back to Undertow, Realm's podcast dedicated to tales of the weird and the wicked. I'm your host, director, and producer, Fred Greenhalgh. We continue today with part 3 of The Collection. Against all advice ever doled out in horror movies, Peter acquired a mysterious book and followed it to the north of England and his father's bizarre estate. He has entered said estate and was immediately almost dismembered by a spooky suit of armor that moves to eliminate all threats with a deadly spear if you make too much noise. Now Peter is collecting himself, faced with the reality that there's an excellent chance he'll never make it out of this house alive. But will he? We'll find out today in part 3 of The Collection.
Swallowing air as though it was quenching a thirst, I backed as far away as I could manage. I'd nearly died in there. What the hell kind of collection had my father assembled? What reason did he have for putting that thing in a room? How had he even gotten it in there without being skewered alive? I felt flush. I tugged at my collar and winced, almost forgetting about my arm. It was still bleeding. Rolling up my sleeve confirmed it was nothing more than a surface scratch, though it could have been much, much worse. What if he'd hit me in the chest? Or the head? The warmth was almost unbearable. I soon realized I stood in a sunbeam that coursed through the window at my left. I ran to it and gawked at the world outside. I didn't care anymore about Father's secrets nor Rap's obsessions. None of it mattered. All I wanted was to get out of that house and get back to the train before it left. But I wasn't going back through that hellish dining room. I'd have to find another way out of the house. My fingers pried at the window, trying to lift it, but it wouldn't budge. It was sealed shut. I scanned the room for something to break the glass with. I was in a library, the walls completely covered with rows and rows of books. I slid a thick tome out from a shelf and scanned the title. Collected Texts on Vigor in Art. How positively dull. I lobbed the book at the window as hard as I could. It bounced off and splattered to the floor. The clunk of something at the door made me whip around. The spearhead was now gone. Damn it. If I smashed the glass and the paladin heard it, he might come through that door. I'd need to hurry out that window. There was nothing heavier in the room I could use to bust the glass. No stone or metal bookends, no chairs, no lamps. Out of the corner of my eye, I spied a standing globe. The sphere was dark navy and speckled with dots that marked countries and cross-hatched by longitude and latitude lines. My father had had one like it in his personal study. The few times I was allowed inside, I used to spin it and let my finger stop in a random place upon it. Then I'd find one of his books and look at all the information I could about that particular place. It was a silly game I played with myself, and in a strange way, I missed the whimsy of it. I brushed my fingers over the globe and gave it a slight turn. The floor dropped out from beneath my feet. I seized the globe stand as the entire room folded over. The thunderous roar of revolving plaster and wood drowned out my own cries of terror. I lost my grip on my father's book, and it fell towards the window now directly below me. Then, the rest of them came. Books rained from the shelves above me, the thick volumes thundering down on my fingers and my head. The glass in the window cracked with each pound against them, and finally shattered. Disturbed and terrified, I forced myself to hold on through the literary storm until the last of the books had tumbled and only silence pervaded. I dangled from the globe stand, the only thing bolted to the floor in the upended space. Sweat trickled down my brow, and my injured arm ached. If I fell, I'd likely go through the shattered window and cut myself up, perhaps fatally in the process. I peered at the globe. I stretched my hand out and swished it through the air, my body teetering back and forth with a failed attempt to reach the globe. I wasn't close enough. Curling my clammy hands further around the globe stand, I shimmied as close as I could. Every time I happened to look down, my stomach pivoted much like the room had. Reaching out once more, I finally touched the globe and a prick of hope returned to me. As I carefully glided Europe back down toward me, the hand anchoring me slipped. I hurtled towards the window, my surroundings a blur. Unexpectedly striking the carpet, I rolled to a stop against a pile of books beneath the broken window. The room tilted at an angle and rocked back and forth in time with the globe. Shaking, I climbed the sloping floor to the orb before steering the earth back to where it belonged. The world was once again how it ought to be. The floor was once again flat beneath my feet, the walls at either side of me. I collapsed to my knees and retched. For a few minutes, it was hard to get my bearings, to tell which way was up and down. My mind raced. I had to get out of here. I needed to. Light glinted on the broken glass in the window. The warmth of the sunlight helped me gather my senses. I wiped my mouth and got to my feet. I now had a way out of the house. I spent a few minutes sifting through the piles of books, searching for the book Rap had given me. Part of me hoped I wouldn't find it, that it had miraculously vanished in the flurry that the globe had caused. Alas, I spotted the cordovan cover peeking out. For moments, I considered leaving it behind. Taking it with me was almost like committing myself to remembering this horror. But I knew that should the police come to me during their investigation of Rap's death, I'd need it as proof of what she was involved in. I tucked it under my arm before I left. I cleared the rest of the hazardous glass shards in the window easily using the book. All through it, I kept my eyes on the paladin's door. Perhaps his room was upended too, and he now lay on the floor like a turtle that couldn't right itself. I smirked as the thought provided me with an odd sort of comfort. I crawled through the window and leapt down into a soft bed of green. The floorless sky welcomed me, and I drew in lungfuls of sweet-smelling air as if I hadn't tasted it in years. The horizon line burned saffron and orange, signaling the descent into evening. I needed to get back to the train before it left. I glanced around for a way back to the road. Dense evergreen hedges rose up around me and blocked my way to the front of the house. Needles jabbed at my arms, and the cut branches scraped my chest as I tried to squeeze through them, but there was not enough room. Thorns had grown in amongst the yew, making them impossible to climb without ripping myself to shreds. "Hello? Anyone?" I called out. Someone had to hear. But the house was half a mile from the road, and I doubted anyone could hear me from so far away. The only open path was a brick walkway to my direct right, leading to the back of the house. Steeling myself, I followed it. Twisting in and around vegetation, I followed the trail through shadows where tufts of ostrich ferns flourished and candelabra primroses popped like Roman candles. After a few minutes, I came to a clearing where a magnificent greenhouse stood. Every wall was made of glass and revealed an impressive array of fronds inside. Delicate branches of orchids, Tendrils of morning glory and starburst swords of gladiolus peeked out, bursts of colour within a green world. White tulips lined the front walk to its entrance. It was the first thing about Caulfield Manor that I could call beautiful, the only thing that had made me feel at ease since I'd arrived. Yet, that apprehensive feeling in my stomach couldn't be quelled. Beyond the greenhouse, there appeared to be another path that wound back toward the manor through the bushes and trees. The quiet put me on edge. I felt very uneasy out in the open, as if something unseen and ominous lurked in the pure beauty of that sky I'd found so refreshing moments ago. I unlatched the door to the greenhouse and stepped inside. Warm moisture surrounded me, dampening my clothes and hair. Slivers of sunlight cut through the foliage and dispersed in the haze. Brushing leaves aside, I inched my way toward the opposite end of the greenhouse. Rapp was right to be paranoid. To think this place and these things not only existed, but were the target of someone who wanted them for an unknown purpose. I couldn't fathom why my own father had wanted them. Even as I began to further doubt his mental stability, I realized there was a perfectly legitimate reason for it all. My father would have studied the items. It was why he locked himself away in his last years, why he had seemed to have lost his mind. Anyone else who'd come across globes that upended rooms or desiccated murderous corpses that came to life at the smallest sound probably would have lost their mind. But my father's obsessive curiosity knew no bounds when it came to his work, and his nature called for him to research. Like most things he studied, this study became a fixation. Did he know there were people out there who wanted these items so badly and were willing to kill to get them? If so, it might have explained his fanatical temperament all the more. As I stopped to wipe the dew and perspiration from my brow, my shoulders prickled as if spiders crawled across my skin. I felt as if I were being watched, my every move dissected. I investigated the ferns until my eyes rested on another set of eyes. These were the color of whiskey, and there was something in them that was animated, yet somehow inert. I waited to see recognition. A sudden rustling before whatever they belonged to sprung from their cover. It never happened. Carefully peeling back the fronds, I fell back, drawing short breaths, my heart banging in my chest. A lion stood amongst the greens, head wreathed by an enormous thicket of hair and crouched in a hunting prowl. It had been killed and stuffed to resemble lifelike instinct and strength. Collecting myself, I climbed back to my feet. Lions had plagued my nightmares as a boy. I spent much of my childhood looking through my father's books when he wasn't at home. When I was 8, one of the most read articles was of the Tsavo man-eaters, a pair of lions that had hunted and killed several railway workers only 3 years before in Kenya. I'd always had a morbid fascination with lions, admiring their appearances and fearing their hunting prowess. One night, I'd awoken from a dream drenched in sweat, a dream that had been so utterly realistic. The purples in the sky were clear, and the feel of the wheaten grass itchy on my skin. I'd been running through the open savannah, blindly zigzagging to and fro with no knowledge of where I was headed. In my memories, I could still see the lions racing toward me, and the instant futility I'd encountered again and again in dream after dream. I'd curled into a ball as the creature's jaws closed down around my skull. Awakened by my shouts, my father had come to my room and flung me out of my own bed, yelling at me that my imagination was dangerous for me. I'd lain there on the floor, stunned and practically in tears. My father had never hit me, but that moment was the most violence he'd ever shown toward me, and an act he'd clearly felt justified in committing. My mother consoled me and put me back to bed, though I didn't sleep the remainder of the night. Staring at this creature reminded me of the similarities between how my father had shouted at me and how Rapp had tried to warn me about the house. They had said the very same thing, and instead of taking Rapp's warning as I should have, my knee-jerk reaction had been to get angry instead. As far as I could tell, the lion before me in the greenhouse was just a taxidermy specimen and nothing more. It hadn't come to life like the paladin in the dining room. It hadn't reacted to the sound of me falling on the stones, nor had it reacted to seeing me. The King of Beasts was in the book, though. There had been an entire page about taxidermy, and I remembered seeing lion among the list of species. I was unwilling to admit that this might be the first truly harmless thing I had come across since entering the Caulfield estate. Keeping my eyes on the lion, I crept along the flagstones toward the opposite end of the greenhouse. Not once did the lion move, but his eyes bore holes through me. I tried to see that it was as harmless as the bronze lions in Trafalgar Square, even safer than them. Hell, it was practically a stuffed animal, albeit a large one. I imagined it as part of Walter Potter's whimsical anthropomorphic dioramas, dressed in a tux, monocle over one of its glass eyes, and perhaps playing croquet. My palms sweated, and the scratching of plants against my neck and hands made me twitch. Plants rustled from somewhere deep to my left, but the lion hadn't moved. A sudden paralysis overtook me. I remembered something I'd read in one of my father's books, written by a man who had hunted lions for sport in the darkest heart of Africa. The male watched and waited while the females did all the work. The females made the ambush. I ran for the other end of the greenhouse. Vines and fronds whipped my face and arms. The rush of foliage around me was as loud as the current of a roaring river. I awaited the white-hot feeling of claws puncturing my skin, that same shock at seeing yellow teeth and hot, sour breath on my face that I'd felt in my dreams as a boy. Each thought tightened my chest until I gasped for breath. Light pierced the jungle, and I bumped into the door on the other side of the greenhouse. I scratched at the knob, fingers slipping over the humid metal. I didn't have time. It was going to get me. I was doomed. The knob turned, and I stumbled through. Slipping on the grass outside, I quickly turned and slammed the door closed, the glass juddering under the force. I stared down at my quaking legs, at the grass stains on my trousers, and at the fog of my breath against the glass door. The swells of vapor expanded with every pant until I closed my mouth and realized they weren't coming for me. I glanced up and came face to face with another set of eyes. The glass between us felt like nothing more than air. The lioness had a frustration in her gaze that was palpable, like a heaviness weighting me down. Her instinct and a ravening desire instilled me with a new and all-encompassing fear where sparks danced in my vision, and I momentarily lost control of my own body. I barely remembered staggering away from the door, vision caught on the silhouettes of not one but 3 different lithe bodies pacing within the glass world. A guttural roar made the hairs on my arms stand. There was nothing nearby I could use to barricade the door, and so I was left with no choice but to turn tail and flee the greenhouse and pray the lions didn't decide to smash out of their glass prison. By the time I stumbled out of the bushes and came face to face with the back of Caulfield Manor again, I was frantic. Collapsing in the grass and breathless, I glanced to the setting sun on the horizon. My hope had all but wasted away as I double-checked the time on my watch. I had missed Wolferton's last train and was stuck at Caulfield for the night.
Hey, Undertow listeners, Fred here, sharing some love for Quince. I don't think of myself as a fashionista, but it turns out actually I'm really particular about what styles work for me, and I'm also really keen to support brands that are safe and ethical, which Quince delivers in spades. What's more, by partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out that middleman and passes the savings on to us. I've gone ahead and grabbed some versatile pieces to upgrade my style, such as a jet black full-zippered hoodie sweater made of Mongolian cashmere. It gives me the looks of a Jedi, while also making me feel like I'm wrapped in a warm hug every time I put it on, which is pretty wonderful. I also love their activewear. I got one of their performance t-shirts, which crazily enough is super comfortable as an underlayer here in New England in cold weather. But I also brought it on my vacation to the tropics of Belize, where it was reliably 85 degrees or more every day. And it was light, breathable, stylish, just incredibly versatile and great piece of clothing. With spring on the way, I am looking to continue to freshen up my wardrobe with killer luxury essentials from Quince, and you can too. Indulge in affordable luxury. Go to quince.com/undertow for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/undertow to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/undertow.
There are many ways to entice a potential new customer with flashy branding and calculated marketing strategies. But at the end of the day, the success of a business comes down to the ability to close the sale. And for businesses like Thrive Cosmetics, Allbirds, or Skims, it's what goes on behind the scenes, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple that makes the difference. For them and for millions of businesses, that difference is made with Shopify. Businesses that want to grow, grow with Shopify. Because if your goal is growth, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And Shopify will make sure you're ready. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. And with Shop Pay, they boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. It's no wonder Shopify is home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/realm.
I was never really a runner. The way I see running is a gift, especially when you have stage 4 cancer. I'm Anne. I'm running the Boston Marathon, presented by Bank of America. I run for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to give people like me a chance to thrive in life, even with cancer.
Join Bank of America in helping Anne's cause. Give if you can at BofA.com/supportAnne. What would you like the power to do? References to charitable organizations is not an endorsement by Bank of America Corporation. Copyright 2025.
My mouth was dry and cottony. I vaguely remembered being asked on the train if I'd like refreshment, and I declined, too locked up in my own head to be bothered. I wanted to kick myself for it. My stomach rumbled then, and I sighed, realizing just how hungry I was too. Though I hadn't seen any food or drink inside, I knew there was nothing in the garden besides inedible flowers. I wasn't sure I'd trust anything potentially edible that I might see inside anyway. Nothing in there appeared to be what it seemed. But even being hungry and thirsty didn't bother me as much as my desire to reach someone. Anyone. After graduating from university, I'd kept in touch with several friends, including my best mate, Aaron. We'd meet up every so often at a pub on Portobello Street, share a jug of beer, maybe 2, and entertain one another with stories of our existences outside of that rigid, didactic template that school provided us. Then the war came. Just like that, our lives were shattered. Aaron and I were the only 2 who returned from it as some version of our former selves. I wished I could turn to him now, wished that I had been more specific when I talked to him on the phone at the train station. What if he didn't call the police like I'd asked? What if he thought it was a joke? But I knew after a few hours he'd get tired of waiting. He'd call around. First Francis, then the post. He'd discover something was amiss. I hadn't told him exactly where I was going, but surely once the police were involved, they'd deduce it. They'd call up that drowsy ticket officer from Wolferton and ask him if he'd seen me. It would only be a matter of time then. Until that happened, I needed to find some kind of shelter for the night, and that left only one option: Caulfield. The thought of being within the house's walls again made me sick to my stomach, but I couldn't remain here in the garden either. I wondered if the lions could still sense me, still smell me from so far away. Now that they knew there was prey for them to hunt, would they break through the plates of glass in the greenhouse? Would they come for me in the darkness when I couldn't see them? If they got out, I'd be at the mercy of their teeth and claws. I couldn't stay here. A stone veranda bordered the back of the house, and 2 doors beckoned to me from within it. Columns of shadows striped over its seemingly harmless walls. The only way out of here was to go back through the house, back through those perilous doors. Not wanting to go back in blindly, I opened my father's book and, in the vestiges of dwindling daylight, perused the volume of his hazardous collection. There had to be a map of the house, a key to finding my way out without being eaten or pulverized by these oddities. All it did was serve as a reminder to the other strange things lying inside and the expected horror for what was possibly to come. The sky grew darker and darker, and I squinted as the pages became harder and harder to read. I turned to a page with a drawing of what appeared to be ordinary spectacles and noticed a stray speck in the center of the illustration. I tried to wipe it away, but found it remained where it was. Not dirt, a blue speck of ink. Why there? And it wasn't even black like the entries in the book were. Frowning, I flipped back to the previous page and searched it for a similar mark. This time, it was down in the bottom left-hand corner. I hunted through the remainder of the book, scrutinizing each page. With each dot I found, my hope steadily grew and grew. When I had found enough to confirm my suspicion, my mother's kind face emerged in my mind. She had called it the dot map. Mother would hide chocolates or money around the house on holidays and give me a piece of paper with nothing but dots on it. The number of dots indicated the house level. If one drew a 4x4 grid of squares on the page, the location of each dot explained the location of the room. Assuming my father had adopted the dot map for his book, it meant that I had some way of telling where I was and where I was going. It also meant that he'd assumed someone would find themselves here in potential danger. Not just anyone, though. Me. I was the only other person who knew about the dot map. If that was the case, then my father knew he would die, and I would come to settle his affairs. I nearly dropped the book. Had my father known he was going to die? Had he killed himself and destroyed his own research in that fire intentionally? I couldn't accept it. He wouldn't resign himself to a death he knew he could avoid. It didn't make any sense. And that he imagined I would come here alone of my own free will. Well, I suppose I had, but... Shaking my head, I realized the darkness had fully descended. The lions roared in the distance and reminded me what would occur if I stayed out here. I had no other choice. I walked up to the door on the right side of the veranda and forced myself to twist the ornate doorknob with a clammy palm. I pictured my wife, telling me that I was safe, as she'd done a few days ago at home. Imagining her voice gave me the strength to push into the hellish house once again. The room should have been dark. The house had no electricity that I knew of, yet there was light. A bright, alabaster room hurt my eyes upon entering. When they finally adjusted, I saw the room's stark emptiness, the featureless architecture, barren walls, and the vast and purposeless size. There was only one door that I'd come through, and no others. I turned to leave, deciding I'd take the alternative route through the left door outside on the veranda. The door I'd come through was gone. In its place was another featureless white wall with rectangular outline traced in black paint. I nudged it with my shoulder and pounded my fist against it. It wasn't real. I was trapped. When I turned back around, another drawn-on door in the opposite corner of the room had appeared. I moved toward it, and something crunched under my shoe, the sound thunderous in the empty space. Flecks of white, like bits of porcelain, covered the floor from where I stood all the way to the opposite wall. I crouched to touch one, and withdrew my hand immediately. It was a tooth. They were all teeth, all shapes, all sizes, all seemingly human. I jumped back, cursing under my breath. A torrent of questions churned in my head. What was this? Why the addition of hundreds of teeth? My father was sick. This proved he was mad. Now, with plenty of light to inspect the book, I desperately thumbed through the pages. I found the image of a tooth displayed prominently and read the passage beneath it out loud. The infected teeth of the Impalers, Vlad Tepes, often referred to as Vlad the Impaler, was a noted figure in Romanian, Bulgarian, and Transylvanian history, and was also Bram Stoker's inspiration for the titular character in his novel, Dracula. During his third reign as Prince of Wallachia in 1476, Vlad and his Moldavian bodyguards were killed by the Turkish army. Nearly a century after their death, rumors circulated about the guards' possible infection of a hematological disease. Parish priest Sorin Albescu performed a deviant reburial on them, staking them with metal spikes in the arms, chest, and head. Also a noted denturist, Albescu removed their teeth and kept them in a large jar, using honey as a preservative. Albescu, having renounced his faith before his death, was buried with the jar, believing the teeth had an unhallowed gift of immortality and would reanimate him. His body was exhumed in 1881, and the perfectly preserved teeth were stored in a crypt in the Carpathian Mountains before I acquired them in 1910, taking a detour on my trip to Ankara. Infected teeth. I put a hand over my mouth. What deadly disease was contained within these bits of ancient bone? I nudged the debris with my foot to make a clear path. Shuffling, I made my way to the center of the room, only pushing the teeth out of the way and not stepping on them. There, I stopped. A thick smell had overtaken my senses, like metal and sweet rot, so awful I had to breathe through my mouth. I closed my eyes. 1, 2, inhale, exhale. I opened them. You can do this. Just a little. Something warm dribbled onto my hand. I gazed at the small golden bead and dabbed my finger in it, a string of it pulling away. The smell infected my senses. I brought my hand up to my nose and inhaled it. It was honey. I glanced up. A watermark overtook the center of the ceiling. As the seconds passed, it darkened to a rich gold color and expanded over the white paint. Strands dripped down into my hair, and I cringed at their warmth against my skull. I edged my way to the door, trying to avoid the oozing honey as it poured from the ceiling. The stench was almost too much to stand now, and I covered my nose with my arm, not knowing what else to do. I reached the painted-on door and pounded on it. It was a solid wall. There weren't any hinges or any cracks in the plaster. I gasped as honey ran down the back of my neck. Desperately, I opened the book once more and pushed it against the wall to keep it dry as I flipped through the pages. There must have been a clue. There was always a clue with every item. I'd forgotten to check for one. Honey dribbled down my forehead, into my eye. I smeared it across my face when I tried to wipe it away. Golden beads oozed down the book, gluing the pages together. A thin layer of honey covered the floor and quickly rose to my ankles within what seemed like a minute. I scratched furiously at the wall. My hand smacked against the imaginary handle and it juddered unexpectedly. Was it real? It couldn't have been. The sticky swipes of honey against the paint had made it almost three-dimensional. A hairline crack cut through the plaster where I'd touched the door frame. Drenching my hands in the honey beneath me, I painted the wall with it. The door's features popped, and the paint deepened into tangible hinges and an existent outline. More honey rushed over my hair and down my face. This time, I couldn't wipe it away. My hands and arms were practically drenched. I couldn't see. The honey rose up to my knees and made my movements sluggish. Groping for the door handle, I grasped it, thumbed down the latch, and wrenched hard. My hands slipped, and I fell back into the liquid gold. Memories flooded over me of the war and my post in Passchendaele. Crawling through thick mud, my arms were fatigued, legs quaking, and chest heaving. The sound of bullets pinged all around. My comrades in arms sunk into the filth around me, their last breaths swallowed by the liquid earth. "You are not going to die here." I sluggishly got to my feet, forked through the honey, and tried for the door again. I hooked my arm around the handle and forced it down, pulling with all my might. The door scraped against the wall as it gave way. I eased myself through the crack, clutching the book to my chest like a life preserver. The honey spilled in after me. I slipped again, falling on my side into the new room, but pulling the door closed after me. Rubbing at my eyes, trying to clear the honey away, I realized there was nothing in them. I opened them and stared down at myself. No honey. I was completely dry. The floors were pristine, and the door behind me was once again a solid wall.
And that was The Collection Part 3, with a horrific new take on just what a honey trap might be. And if you think the estate is finished with deadly objects with novel ways to kill off Peter, oh, do not worry, dear friends. We are just getting started. Come back next time for Part 4 and more deliciously strange horrors. The Collection was written by Katherine Silva, performed by Cliff Chapman, with editing and sound design by Rory O'Shea. Produced by yours truly, Fred Greenhalgh, as a Dagaz media production for Realm. Undertow is a production of Realm, hosted by Fred Greenhalgh. Associate produced by Devin Shepherd. Executive produced by Fred Greenhalgh and Molly Barton.
The Warning Woods has haunting horror stories that are sure to linger with you long after listening. I'm Miles Tritle, writer and narrator of The Warning Woods. Each week, I write an original scary story and share it with you on The Warning Woods. I've written 2 novels and nearly 200 short stories spanning the horror genre. If you're into scary stories, you need to check out The Warning Woods. Listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for The Warning Woods and click play at your own risk.
When San Francisco is rocked by a series of brutal slayings, the case falls to homicide detectives Brian Clouser and his partner Pookie Chang. It falls to them because Brian is always first on the scene, driven there by dreams that predict the killings in exquisite detail. Meanwhile, a shadowy vigilante, seemingly armed with superhuman powers, is out there killing the killers. Brian and Pookie's superiors, from the mayor on down, seem strangely eager to keep the detectives from discovering the truth. Doubting his own sanity and stripped of his badge, Brian begins to suspect that he stumbled into the crosshairs of a shadow war that has gripped his city for more than a century. A war waged by a race of killers living in San Francisco's unknown underground ruins, emerging at night to feed on those who will not be missed. Nocturnal is a complete serialized novel with 45 episodes, available for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.